Welcome back to Liberty Live. Today we're going to be discussing the three kings. Who are the three kings really? And how did they go from Magi to kings? Now, we pick up our story here in Matthew chapter 2. If you are like me, many of you have received a card like this in the mail this very week. We see here 3 camels, 3 men, and 3 gifts. Now, the legend has it that these 3 men are Gaspar, Melchior, and Belteshazzar, and that they're from neighboring peninsulas in the Arabah. Now, we're going to get into this today about what the Bible really says about this, and we have to look at some Old Testament prophecy to understand why does it matter where they came from? How integral are they to the story? Absolutely. Follow me here first in Matthew chapter 2. The visit of the wise men is the subtitle. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose. His star. And Herod heard this. He assembled all Jerusalem with him, and he was troubled because the chiefs, the priests, and scribes of all the people had inquired where Christ was to be born. And they told him, Bethlehem of Judea, for it is so written in the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, and land of Judah, are by no means the least of the rulers of Judah, and from you shall come a ruler who shall shepherd my people Israel. Okay, so this is the prophecy they quoted to King Herod, but it doesn't mention anything specifically about the star. And I want to show you a verse where this is coming from, one in the Bible and one from the Apocrypha that used to be part of the Bible that most of the Western Church uses, and later in its canonization process was set aside, known as the Apocrypha or the additional books. Now, I want to read you a few verses here from Numbers 24, 16 and 17. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Remember, Jacob was Abraham's grandson. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. This is the Jacob we're speaking about, whose name was changed to Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down the sons of Sheth. And this is speaking to the Messiah, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will destroy and end all oppression. He has to be, as he said, salvation is of the Jews. He has to come from the Jewish tribes. He has to come from Jacob, wherefore we get the 12 tribes of Israel, and from Judah specifically, as the aforementioned scripture, that this is where the authority and king is going to come. Now, I want to talk about the 3 kings for a minute. By the way, Gaspar, Belteshazzar, and Melchior. Okay, so Gaspar means treasure in its native language to India. So they think maybe he came from India. Belteshazzar, if you remember when Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, surnamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, meaning God is my judge, was surnamed Belteshazzar, and our Belteshazzar, and this is Belteshazzar. Sounds familiar, right? Because it's a Babylonian name. And it's praising, it says, my God Baal protects. Not Baal like the foreign goddess of Canaan, the foreign god of Canaan, but Baal, one of the gods in Babylon. And so we almost believe 100% he was either from Babylon or Mesopotamia. Now, Melchior, Melech in Hebrew means king, and Ur means light, like Ur HaOlam, or HaOlam, the light of the world. So we believe that these were either names from the eastern regions, transliterated or understood into a Semitic language like Hebrew that we understand, or that possibly he was close by, he was a little further, and he was furthest. I also have to tell you that these 3 kings are in the oral traditions and history and legends went from, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, grandfather, father, and grandson. Whether they were related or not, that's another thing to be disputed, seeing as how at the end we think they were buried together. There's an interesting, one of the largest churches in all of Germany has a gold sarcophagus with 3 skulls in it from the 3 kings that supposedly Constantinople's mother purchased as a relic in the 4th and 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, when all of these relics came forth from the biblical precedent. And from this time on, it was enshrined. And what's interesting, although we can't prove, there's not been the ability to test DNA or anything like this from where they come from. However, in the late 1800s, the sarcophagus was opened. We see three skulls with three crowns. And literally, the back of the skull is called a suture. So for an example, you have a baby, has a soft spot. Then later on, the skull closes and it forms. And when you look where the skull closes, here's some pictures. It looks zigzagged, literally like almost again like gears, but they're tightly knit. And what you'll notice is on a young person, it'll be like this. There'll be some room in between. On a older person, there will be less room, and on an old person, there will be no room at all, and it will almost begin to lose the seam. This is what we see in the sarcophagus of the three kings. Now see, they have pointed hats like Smurf hats or elf hats. They have what looks like leggings or tight pants and pointy shoes. These are what they believe the Zoroastrians were priests of Persia. When we say priests or magi, that's where the term magician's coming from. So you go, how do you get from magician to king? I'm going to get to that in a minute. But let me tell you, most people believe that this relief was composed because of the oral traditions and the eyewitnesses that were there that purported from generation to generation, because such an event had never happened in the history of the world. Now, in this image, you see one has no beard, circle here. One has a beard, an older man, black hair, black beard, and another man has gray hair, gray beard, longer beard, meaning the oldest man. And this could represent prophetically the stages of wisdom, the stages of kingship, the stages of authority, but it also, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the totality of the life of a man from birth to death. The life cycles are encapsulated in Jewish tradition and many wisdoms in all the world of the one, that we have processes of life from milk to meat, from the process of maturation, maturity, and that at every level, Jesus is king from the lowest of men to the highest of kings, to the babe and to the aged. How did we get from magi to kings? In the book of Psalms 72, we read these precious verses here, and it reads, "May he have dominion from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. May desert tribes bow down before him, and his enemies lick the dust. May the kings of Tarshish and of the coastlands render him tribute. May the kings of Sheba and Seba bring him gifts. May they fall down before him, all kings. May all nations serve him." It goes on later in verse 15 to say, "May he live long. May the gold of Sheba be given to him. And may prayer be made for him continually, and blessings invoked to him all the day." So we're speaking here about the gifts here from Sheba and Seba, and we're speaking about gold. Now, if we go a little further into the book of Isaiah 60 verse 6, this is going to get so clear. Isaiah 60 verse 6, "A multitude of the nations shall come to you. Camels will cover you. The camels of Midian and of Ephah, and all those from Sheba will come." What are they going to come bringing? "Frankincense and gold and the good news, the praises of the Lord." That's exactly what the wise men did. They came from afar, following a star, bringing frankincense, gold, and myrrh to adore the king. Now I have one more verse for you. I want to lock this in because this is really going to give us understanding of where these men actually came from. Jeremiah 6:20. And it reads, "What use to me is frankincense that comes from Sheba, or sweet cane from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable, nor your sacrifices are pleasing to me." So God was rebuking people for bringing the finest incense and spices from all over the world to bring to God's temple, but their hearts were far from him. Notice where the frankincense came from. Sheba. I'll tell you on the map where Sheba and Saba is. Also in Tobit, this is the apocryphal book I promised you about, "A bright light will shine to all parts of the earth. Many nations shall come to you from afar, and the inhabitants of all limits of the earth drawn to you by the name of the Lord, bearing in their hands gifts for the King of heaven. Every generation shall give joyful praise to you, and you shall call the chosen one throughout all your generations forever. Now, this is the generations we talked about, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the wise men being grandfather, father, and son. And it's interesting, too, on the map here. Let me show you this. And now, also, the Queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon as well on camels. So we understand this is something like, okay, this is not only is it possible, it's not that it's happened before in this way. She came because of Solomon's wisdom. She came to Jerusalem, but she came bringing gold and spices. So there's a corroborated event that this is where the goods were that were venerated and honored to bring to the King of Heaven. Now here's a map. And on the map you see Yemen and Oman. This, notice how it says Sheba, and here it would say Saba. Sheba and Saba. Now, the kingdom of Sheba went like this. It also encapsulated Ethiopia in the days of Solomon, which is why they say the Queen of Sheba came from the south. However, the only place in the world where King of Kings frankincense grows is in the Dhofar mountain region of Oman, which would be the biblical Saba. Okay, and what would happen is frankincense riders and trail riders would ride the spice trail up here to Petra. Petra was a city. Here's a picture of Petra. It's one of the wonders of the world. They also shot Indiana Jones there. And they would come to Petra here, and this is where frankincense and myrrh were traded and sold. And then all of a sudden they'd follow right up here to Jerusalem. So this is the east. Now, whether they came straight from Mesopotamia, from Persia, and they came straight this way, the question is, where then did they get the goods that came from here? Remember when the Lord said, even if you have frankincense from Sheba, Yemen, and Oman, this is where the finest frankincense grows in the world, and only here, by the way. There's different types of frankincense that grow here in Somalia and Ethiopia and even in India, but the Boswellia sacra, which is medicine grade, it actually is called King of Kings frankincense. It is 10 times or 15 times the amount of the frankincense that comes here from the Boswellia serrata tree, which is used for medical grade. Now, the frankincense that comes from this region is burned all over the world in churches, and other people burn it and they use it for oil and other medical purposes as well. But it's nothing like what comes from Oman. That would be like comparing artificial grape juice that came from concentrate to a 200-year-old bottle of wine. Now, when they came up from here, say that the spices and gold and myrrh came from here, went to Petra, then the kings came from the east and bought it and came in. That's still a possibility. But the point is that this region, the southernest part of the Saudi Arabian peninsula of the Araba, this is going to be where the goods came from. The nations came, and the kings, the representation of these nations, would come up to honor and extol the Lord. This is myrrh, by the way. And what myrrh is it's sap from the Camphora myrrha tree. It's used for embalming. It's used for burial purposes. It's used for perfume. It's used for cosmetics. It's used for indigestion. This is an amazing, and it's a topical analgesic. It's an amazing substance here. This is Boswellia serrata or carteri. There's several different types of frankincense trees, like there's several different types of pine, spruce, evergreen trees that line Colorado, where we're from. And there's several different palm trees, several different types of potatoes, several different types of dates. They do not share the same values. And this is also tree sap. Now, what's different in this is not only the boswellic acid, there are other medical properties that separate those. And this is a vessel like the kings would have taken. This is actually from the New Testament era, some parts of here, from the 1st century. And when we open it, we actually see King of Kings frankincense. Now, in the time of the biblical narrative, they would say that, for an example, an offering of frankincense like this would be 1 year's worth of Roman wages. And this frankincense here, the King of Kings frankincense, Boswellia sacra, was burned all over the world. And this gift brought by the Magi, or the kings, was the highest gift to give to the priest of priests. Now, one thing you need to know about this frankincense, this is what was burned in the temple of the Lord twice a day. This is the highest gift for the God of all gods and the King of all kings. No wonder it's given to him when he's in flesh on the earth. Now, let me tell you just a little bit about the star. When they said his star, meaning that this was a star of kingship, this is what they said was the planet Jupiter. And Aries, the ram, there's a time when all the constellations, biblically they're called Mazzaroth, by the way. And this is before people got all weird with astrology and they tried to take God out and keep the data in. Anyway, the Mazzaroth is what God gave us to discern times and seasons. This is in the book, in Psalms and in the book of Job. But in this specific example, when they were looking for a time when the nation of Judah, or Aries the ram representing Israel, when the star would come, Jupiter would come, and they would both rise from the east together, which was a phenomenon, you understand, like a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. And there was one time in April, taking us back to the story of Matthew, when Aries the ram would have come up and the star of Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, which was looked at as a nova superstar, would come up inside, meaning that the kingly planet is now in the tribe of Judah. It's in the nation of Israel. And in the ram, meaning that this is the ultimate sacrifice. So they follow this star exactly over the position of the land. And this would be like me saying that there was a shooting star and our anniversary. It lines the date up on earth with something in heaven. Let it be done on earth as is in heaven. And these people, by the way, the Magi, these were like Daniel in Babylon. Remember when Daniel went to Babylon, and again, they changed his name, but he was the name Daniel, God is my judge. Daniel went and he served Nebuchadnezzar. Then after Nebuchadnezzar went mad, then he ended up giving glory to God. The Babylonians were defeated by the Persians. Cyrus the Great comes, and Daniel serves under Cyrus the Great. Now, just like Joseph in Egypt, okay, Pharaoh had all his Egyptians and astrologers. They couldn't interpret the dream. And this is the word, again, Magi turned into magician. And again, they took God out of it and made it a shameful thing. They ended up hating God because they tried to pretend they had the power of God, but they did not have his spirit. Take it one step further. What did magicians say? Abracadabra. Do you know in Hebrew the term abarakadabra means I create something out of nothing, but the term bara is only linked to God, meaning like I can create anything I want. Yeah, go to Home Depot and build whatever you want out of stuff that's already been created, like the wood. Who made that? That's bara. Okay, so you understand what I'm saying, that in the beginning, possibly the Magi's were God-fearing, God-seeking men who paid attention to everything. They were aware of these writings in Isaiah and Jeremiah, in Tobit, and even in the New Testament, because they came to worship the Messiah, the ruler of the universe and the King of Kings and the God of gods, who comes in the flesh. Beloved, no matter where you find yourself in this Christmas story, remember Christ. Christmas is every day, by the way, for those of you Jew and Gentiles who are saved. We honor and extol the King of Kings for all that he has done for us and will do. Again, a king for the lowest of men to the highest of kings. His authority will go forth from sea to shining sea, and from the distant lands he will cause all nations to come and bow down before him. His majesty is awesome. His power is uncontainable. His name is majestic and beautiful, and his spirit is perfect. Beloved, receive him. The wise men went, the kings went to worship. What will you do this Christmas?